My name is Erica Vale, 30 years old. The chandelier above the Anderson dining table hummed faintly, with the weight of light crystals throwing small, fractured suns across the white tablecloth and the ridges of the silverware. The room smelled like old wood polish and truffle butter, and the kind of wealth that's been rehearsed so long it feels like liturgy. I took my usual seat at the far end, a polite distance from the center of power where my father placed his phone like a small, black scepter at his elbow, and my mother let her bracelet sing each time she reached for a glass. I had learned to breathe quietly here, to let my face hold, to keep my pulse steady, no matter what bled into the conversation. So Emma Marcus said, swirling his wine as if the glass had an audience. Still doing that little tech thing in Seattle? I cut into the steak the kitchen had over-rested. Yes, I said, gentle measured. Still in Seattle. My company's doing well. Company, Victoria snorted lip gloss shining under the chandelier. How adorable. We develop AI solutions for financial forecasting, I said, because the truth is easier to carry than the shame they tried to hand me. We've had a good quarter. That's nice, dear, my mother murmured, in the tone that turns praise into a pat on the head. So sweet that you're keeping busy. Richard Anderson didn't look up yet. He liked timing a sense of crescendo. The phone at his elbow vibrated once, and he silenced it with 2 fingers, then set the screen face down, preparing the room for his performance. Speaking of business, he said. Lifting his gaze at last, I have an announcement. Knives paused. Conversation gathered itself and went still. He flattened his tie with his palm a priest before the altar. Anderson Holdings is expanding. We're acquiring 3 new properties downtown. Total investment $40 million. He smiled without teeth. This will cement us as the premier development firm in the region. Dad, that's incredible, Marcus said quickly. The first believer at the new church, he raised his glass. To the king. We're so proud, Victoria added, though her thumb was already on her screen beneath the table edge. Thomas leaned forward, hope brightening him. Does this mean promotions? I've been running residential for 2 years now, and we'll discuss it, Dad said, which was yes, without paperwork. Financing is tricky, he went on, but the returns will be substantial. You always make it work, darling, my mother said. Hand over his hand, bracelets chiming like polite bells. I placed my fork down carefully. If you need additional funding, I said I could help. Silence dropped. Not the contemplative kind, the shocked, unmasked kind. Victoria's smile curled. I could invest $300,000, I said. The way you offer a hand to someone who insists they're not drowning. Marcus laughed first. 300,000. He pronounced the number as if it were a quaint souvenir from a place he no longer visited. Emma, this is a $40 million deal. It's sweet that you want to help, my mother said in the tone she kept polished for charity galas. But this is serious business. My father finally looked directly at me. We work with serious investors, he said. Institutional money. Not, Victoria added, because she adored finishing his sentences when it meant finishing me. Not hobbyist cash from an app that probably lives at a coffee shop. Victoria Thomas said softly. We have relationships with venture firms, private equity banks, Marcus said. At this level, individuals don't make sense unless they're bringing 8 or 9 figures. Do you have $100 million you forgot to mention? Laughter pooled and warmed the table. Jennifer, his wife, wiped the corner of her eye, as if I'd told a charming joke. I tapped my phone awake under the table and typed what I'd prepared long ago, but never intended to use. David, withdraw all backing from Anderson Holdings effective immediately. Authorization code AV7734. Execute after the board meeting begins at 7:00 p.m. I hit send. I set the phone face down beside my plate. In the glass of water near my hand, the chandelier's reflections trembled like small schools of fish. As I was saying, my father continued, a fraction more irritated by my screen than by my offer. This expansion represents the culmination of 30 years of work. Relationships, reputation, results. It isn't something you can buy into with a check. Even a $300,000 check, my mother added, smile, soft as fine sandpaper. I understand, I said. And I did deeper than they knew. Across from me, Victoria tilted her head, watching my stillness, the way a cat watches a quiet bird. Do you, though? Because you seem to think whatever you're doing in Seattle puts you on our level. She lifted her glass and let the chandelier burn inside it. It doesn't. That isn't what she said, Thomas tried, voice careful. It's what she meant, Victoria said, drunk on certainty as much as wine. Remember when she wanted to join the company after college? Thank God Dad said no. I remembered. Wharton's auditorium, all velvet and applause. The letter after. The lesson before that, in this house where I learned to control tone and hands and heartbeat. The tiny scar on my left wrist from the night I reached for a glass in this very room, and the glass slid and shattered, and I bled, and no one looked up from the conversation about tax losses because losing is acceptable when you can name it profit. I found my own way, I said. Yes, my mother replied, soothing the moment closed. And we're happy for you. But this is above your pay grade. My phone buzzed once. I did not look. Dad's face was elastic with satisfaction. Our primary backer, he said, just increased their commitment. Another 50 if we need it. Who is it? Jennifer asked, eyes bright with the gossip of capital. Confidential, Dad said. They've been with us 5 years. A very sophisticated operation. 5 years. Must be nice, I said, and took a sip of water. My phone buzzed again. In the study down the hall, the one with the locked drawer that didn't used to be locked. There was a clock you could hear in the vents if you stopped pretending not to notice things. It ticked toward 7. Is something wrong? My mother asked when I glanced at the archway as if I could see the clock that way. No, I said, nothing at all. Dad's phone rang. He declined it. His jaw set in a way I recognized from childhood arguments and market corrections. The phone rang again. He declined it again. Maybe you should get that, I said gently. It can wait, he said. They'll leave a message. It rang immediately a third time. He snatched it up. This better be important, he said, the room included in the threat. We watched while irritation washed off his face and left something bare. What do you mean withdrawn? He asked, voice losing its coat. No, that's check again. All of it. Silence except for a crystal's faint click against crystal in the air above us. Who authorized immediately? He stood from the table without seeing the chair phone already pressed tight. I'll call you back. He moved toward the study, the king off his square. Marcus slid his chair back to follow, then hesitated and looked at Thomas, who was already pale. What's going on? My mother said, but to no one who could answer. It'll be a miscommunication, Marcus said, the way a man says the bridge will hold, because he has already stepped out onto it. Victoria set her glass down too quickly, and it left a ring on the table. It's ridiculous. One firm can't pull that much, and— Depends who the firm is, Thomas said almost to himself. I watched the archway. In my head, calculations moved like quiet machinery. This room had always taught me to choose between bleeding and composure. I chose composure, and later I learned to turn it into leverage. From the study, my father's voice rose muffled, then sharp. The clock through the vent answered with its dull, implacable tick. My phone vibrated once more on the table, a single polite thrum against linen. Victoria's eyes flicked to it, and then to me. Are you concerned at all? She asked, Hunting. About what I said, and kept my tone light, curious. You told me this is ocean business. She held my gaze for a beat too long, and I saw it not just contempt, but fear of a kind she didn't have a word for yet. Dad reappeared in the doorway, the set of his shoulders suddenly human. He did not sit. There's some kind of issue with our primary backer, he said, not looking at me. It's being sorted. His phone rang again, a shrill insistence that peeled the veneer from the moment. He answered without glancing at the name. Yes, Bill. He stopped listening. His free hand went to his tie and loosened it a fraction, as if that would widen the airway. Understood, he said finally, and hung up. The chandelier chimed once in the venting air. Somewhere outside, a car rolled past on the gravel. The phone rang again. He lifted it slower this time, and we all waited forks, suspended glass rims, stale with breath. He answered. And I set my hands in my lap and watched the second call begin. He stood there listening, the light from his phone screen turning his face the color of ash. What do you mean frozen accounts? He asked. That's not possible, Bill. We have contracts. His voice cracked like ice. Check again. I don't care. Check again. He ended the call without a goodbye pacing now. The rhythm of his shoes on marble felt too loud like a heartbeat we weren't meant to hear. Mom rose halfway from her chair. Richard, what's happening? He didn't answer her. He was already dialing another number. Lawrence, it's Richard. I just got a call from the bank, our main funding. He stopped listening. Yes, the primary backer. What? No, that's not true. They wouldn't. His jaw tightened. Lawrence, listen to me. We've worked together for 15 years. There's no reason for... Hello. He pulled the phone away, stared at the blank screen, then called again. Nobody spoke. Even Victoria's smirk had fallen away. Finally, Thomas said softly, Dad, what's going on? Dad looked up as if seeing us for the first time. Our investor just withdrew $180 million. The air seemed to thicken. The chandelier hummed quietly like it knew something we didn't. 180 Marcus started, then stopped. That's that's the expansion. That's everything, Thomas whispered. I'm aware, Dad said sharply. I'm trying to figure it out. He moved toward his study again, barking into the phone. Get me our legal team. Now. No, now. Tell them to find out what happened. The office door shut behind him, leaving the rest of us in a silence that hummed louder than noise. Mom sank into her chair. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her wine, missing the glass the first time. This can't be happening. Who could do that? Jennifer asked, her voice small. Someone powerful, Victoria said quickly. But Dad will fix it. He always does. I looked down at my plate. The steak had gone cold. I cut a small piece, chewed slowly, and waited for the next vibration of my phone. When it came, I glanced at the message. David Anderson Holdings board meeting started. Withdrawal confirmed. They're panicking. I locked the screen and placed the phone back on the table. He'll fix it, I said softly. He always does. The office door burst open again. My father's composure had cracked clean down the center. They're saying all investment partners are reassessing, he said, running a hand through his hair. Lawrence won't return my calls. The board's in chaos. Mom stood moving toward him. Richard, he cut her off. It's sabotage. Someone's trying to destroy us. Marcus pushed his chair back. What about the contracts? They can't just walk away. They can, Dad said tightly, if there's a capital restructuring clause. I lifted my glass. Most private funds have them, I said mildly. His eyes snapped to me. Excuse me? I shrugged. It's common. A firm can withdraw or reallocate capital under specific market conditions. Victoria frowned. Since when are you an expert in private equity? Since I work in tech finance, I said evenly. I read things. Thomas looked from me to Dad. Who's the firm? Dad exhaled. Pacific Northwest Ventures. Silence again. Never heard of them, Marcus said. They've been our primary backer for 5 years, Dad said. Quiet. Sophisticated. The perfect partner until tonight. Mom's face drained of color. Why would they pull out now? Dad's phone buzzed again. He answered, listened for a few seconds, and his shoulders dropped. They're saying it was authorized internally. Effective immediately. He hung up slowly. The word immediately seemed to linger in the air, echoing faintly against the marble. Victoria's voice trembled for the first time. But that means we're exposed, Dad said. Completely. Nobody moved. The chandelier flickered slightly as if the house itself shuddered. I watched him pace. The man who had never bowed to anyone now looked smaller, fighting ghosts on a battlefield he didn't know existed. Do you know them personally? Marcus asked. This Pacific group. Of course not, Dad said. They came through intermediaries. High-level introductions. Very discreet. That's how big money works. Apparently, I murmured. What's that supposed to mean? Victoria snapped. Just that discretion can be dangerous, I said, and sipped my water. Dad's phone buzzed again, and this time he put it on speaker. Lawrence, a voice came through, calm and clinical. Richard, I heard about your situation. I'm calling to inform you Hicks Capital can't provide bridge financing right now. What? Until the Pacific Northwest matter is resolved, no serious investors will engage. They have significant influence. They can't have that much power, Dad said, his voice breaking. Richard, they could buy out Hicks tomorrow if they wanted, Lawrence replied. If they pulled funding, they had a reason. Fix it or your company's finished. The line went dead. Dad stared at the phone like it had struck him. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. Marcus stood knocking over his chair. Dad, we can find someone else. We can. Thomas's laptop chimed softly. You might want to see this, he said, his fingers moving fast. News alert. Word spreading. Investors are already questioning our liquidity. Dad closed his eyes. This can't be real. It's real, I said quietly. Every head turned toward me. What do you mean? Victoria asked, suspicion sharpening her tone. I held her gaze. It's real, I repeated. And it's only the beginning. Before she could answer, Dad's phone buzzed again. He hesitated this time, glancing at me as if I'd said more than I had. He answered, Yes, what? No, that's not possible. His face blanched. They can't do that. We own... He stopped. How much? A long pause. 51%. He lowered the phone, slowly, disbelief hollowing him out. They've just exercised majority control of the Morrison building, he said. Marcus blinked. What? That's ours. It was, Dad said. Now it's theirs. A chill moved through the room. Even the air vents seemed to fall silent. I set down my glass. Actually, I said softly, if they held 51%, it's within their rights. Dad turned to me. How do you know that? It's public record, I said. Property filings. Anyone who looks closely enough could find it. Thomas typed furiously. She's right, he murmured. PNV shows up in almost every major property we manage. They've been there all along. Victoria's voice rose. How did we not see this? Because they came in through subsidiaries, I said, my tone still calm. Different times, different names. That's how stealth investment works. Who are you, Erica? Victoria asked suddenly. I met her eyes, someone who reads the fine print. Dad's phone buzzed one last time. He didn't pick it up. He was staring at me now, truly seeing me for the first time. Erica, he said quietly, what do you know about Pacific Northwest Ventures? The question hung in the air like smoke. I smiled faintly. Enough, I said. And this time nobody laughed. He didn't move for a moment. The phone buzzed again in his hand, the screen lighting his face in pulses of pale blue. But he ignored it. Enough, he repeated, as if testing the weight of the word. What does that mean? It means, I said softly, I've followed their work for years. They're efficient, careful. They don't make mistakes. Marcus let out a brittle laugh. Then why pull out sounds like they just made the biggest one of their careers? I met his eyes. Maybe they finally realized who they were doing business with. That landed like a small grenade. Dad's jaw flexed. You're implying something, Erica. Say it. I'm not implying anything, I said. I'm observing. A 5-year relationship ends in one phone call. Maybe that's less about them and more about what they've seen here. Don't play games, Victoria snapped. You clearly know something. Who are they really? I looked around the table at the polished silver at the faces that had always measured me in fractions of approval and felt a strange calm settle over me. They're investors, I said. Private. Discreet. They move through shell companies and intermediaries. They build portfolios so clean you can't see the fingerprints. Thomas was typing again, his forehead creased. She's right. Their filings go through half a dozen LLCs, all of them tied back to a single address in Seattle. Dad's eyes flicked toward me, suspicion dawning. Seattle, he said. That's where you... Work I finished for him. Yes. Silence again, denser this time. Victoria's voice trembled. You're lying. I have no reason to, I said quietly. You just never asked. Marcus shook his head, his voice rising. This is ridiculous. You're saying you know the people who just torpedoed our company? I'm saying, I replied, I understand their methods. They don't move without purpose. Dad leaned forward, knuckles pressed to the table. Then tell me their purpose. I held his gaze. Control. For the first time, he didn't look sure of his own reflection in the glass. Control, he echoed. They don't want to destroy you, Richard, I said. They want you to understand who's really been keeping the lights on. The chandelier flickered as if responding. Mom whispered, Erica, what are you talking about? I didn't answer. Instead, I reached for my phone. One unread email from David Chin waited on the screen's subject line. Simple ownership summary, PNV. I tapped forward. Check your inbox, Dad. He frowned, unlocking his phone. The seconds stretched the room, holding its breath. His expression changed slowly, confusion, then disbelief, then a pale, terrible understanding. What is this? He whispered. Mom rose and leaned over his shoulder. I watched her face fold inward as she read. Her hand covered her mouth. Marcus moved closer, eyes darting across the screen. No, he said. No way. Victoria's voice broke. That's not that can't. It can, I said quietly. Dad looked up at me, voice barely audible. You. Yes. You're Pacific Northwest Ventures. I am, I said. The words dropped like stones into still water. The ripples spread across every face. Marcus took a step back as if I'd physically struck him. You make apps? Victoria whispered, disbelief bending her vowels. I do, I said. That was the start. But my company isn't just about code. It's about data patterns, behavior prediction. I learned where money moves before it moves. That's how PNV began. Dad sank into his chair. 800 million, he said, the number barely leaving his lips. 847, I corrected, but who's counting? The chandelier's light fractured again across the table, catching in his eyes. 5 years, he murmured. You've been funding us for 5 years. I nodded, quietly. I wanted to see if you'd ever look past the surface long enough to notice. Why hide it? Thomas asked softly. Why not tell us? Because I wanted to see if respect could exist without a dollar sign attached, I said. Victoria's voice was sharp again, but thin this time. So you pulled everything, just to humiliate us. No, I said, to remind you what power really looks like. It isn't sitting at the head of the table. It's deciding who eats at all. She flinched like I'd hit her. Dad's voice broke through. Horse. What happens now? I took a slow breath. That depends on you. On me. On whether you can accept that I'm not the child you dismissed. That I've built something real, something stronger than your empire. Mom's eyes filled silent tears, catching the light. Erica, please. I looked at her gently. I'm not here for revenge. I just want acknowledgement. A seat at the table I was told I didn't belong at. The silence that followed wasn't hostility anymore, it was realization. Quiet, heavy, irreversible. Outside, the night pressed against the tall windows. A siren wailed faintly in the distance. Inside, my family sat in the ruins of their certainty, and I stood in the wreckage of mine. Tomorrow, I said, finally, the board will know what happened. But tonight you do. You wanted serious investors. I smiled faintly. Congratulations. You found one. Dad exhaled shakily. You've made your point. I shook my head. Not yet. But I will. And with that, I picked up my phone, glanced once more at the unread messages stacking beneath David's name, and walked toward the study door. Behind me, the chandelier stilled the air, too heavy for even its light to move. The door to the study stood half open, light spilling across the marble like an interrogation lamp. I stepped inside, feeling the temperature drop with the hush of soundproofed walls. My father followed a few steps behind, his movements slower now, each one pulled down by the weight of something he hadn't named yet. He closed the door. Sit, he said, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. I stayed standing. You don't have to command me anymore, Dad. We're past that. He stared at me. For the first time, I couldn't read what lived behind his eyes, fear maybe, or a realization too big to fit into words. You built this, he said finally. All of it. While pretending to be some startup founder in Seattle. I didn't pretend, I said. I am a startup founder in Seattle. I just built something else too. He exhaled slowly. You could have told me. Would you have listened? His silence answered for him. I walked to the window, watching the reflection of the chandelier from the dining room beyond. From this side of the glass, the table looked like a painting figure's frozen mid-collapse. You always told me business was about leverage, I said. About knowing who really holds the cards. That's true, he admitted. I learned that from you. He leaned back against his desk. And now you're using it against me. No, I said. I'm using it with you. If you'll let me. He frowned. If I'll let you. I turned. You said Anderson Holdings was a family business. So treat me like family. Not like the daughter who doesn't understand money because her power doesn't look like yours. From the dining room came the faint echo of voices, Victoria's rising, Marcus trying to sound calm. Thomas typing, always typing. They'll never forgive you, Dad said. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Then what do you want? I want what's mine. He looked away, the words landing heavier than I'd intended. And what's that? A seat at the table, a voice, transparency, and yes, respect. He let out a dry laugh. You think that can be negotiated? Everything can be negotiated, I said. You taught me that too. The desk between us felt like a fault line. Finally, he nodded once, almost imperceptibly. What are your terms? I stepped closer. I'll restore the full 180 million, plus 20 more to stabilize the expansion. But from now on, I have a permanent board seat with voting rights and access to all company records. His brow furrowed. You realize that gives you control over... I already have control, I said, quiet but unflinching. This just makes it official. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. And if we refuse, then Anderson Holdings collapses within a month, I said. Every property tied to your name has at least partial ownership through my subsidiaries. You'd be litigating ghosts until retirement. He swallowed hard. You've thought this through. For 5 years. A faint knock came at the door. My mother's voice soft but urgent. Richard, Erica. He didn't answer. He was still looking at me, the way a man studies a mirror and doesn't like what he sees staring back. Finally, he said quietly, you win. This isn't about winning. He almost smiled. Then what is it? Balance. I walked past him and opened the door. My mother stood there, hands clasped at her chest, eyes red. Erica, she whispered. We're sorry. I'm sorry. We never meant... Yes, you did, I said gently. But I understand why. You thought control meant safety. It doesn't. Her lips trembled. What happens now? I glanced toward the dining room. My siblings had fallen silent, waiting. The whole house felt like a held breath. Now I said we rebuild. Together, if you can handle what that really means. I walked back to the table. Everyone looked up wary, as though I were a stranger who'd wandered in wearing my own face. I'm restoring the funding, I said. All of it. Plus 20 million. The expansion will go ahead. Marcus exhaled shakily. You're serious. I don't bluff with millions, I said. Thomas looked at me with something close to admiration. You'll have a board seat. Yes. That's fair, he said. Victoria crossed her arms, but her voice was smaller than usual. You really control $800 million. 847, I corrected. But who's counting? To my surprise, she gave a small, breathless laugh. You're terrifying. Thank you, I said. My father had followed me out of the study. He came to stand beside me, his voice quieter now, stripped of command. Partners. I studied his outstretched hand. For years I'd waited for it to mean something real. I took it. Partners, but in writing. He nodded once. Done. My phone buzzed again. I answered. David, yes. Authorize restoration of all funds. Increase to 200 million total. Prepare the board paperwork for Anderson Holdings. Yes, include my voting rights clause. Monday morning filing. I hung up. The room stayed silent, filled with the static of disbelief. Mom wiped her eyes. Erica, I don't even know what to say. Say nothing, I said softly. Just remember this feeling next time you underestimate someone who doesn't shout to be heard. She nodded, her throat tightening. I looked around the table one last time. You'll have your funding back by tomorrow morning. The board will have my paperwork by Monday. I suggest you start adjusting to the new structure. Then I picked up my coat. Erica, wait, Mom said. Can we talk? Really talk? I paused at the doorway. Call my office, I said. My assistant will set a time. The look on their faces, shock, guilt, respect tangled together, was almost worth the years of invisibility. Almost. Outside, the night air was sharp and clean. My car waited at the end of the circular drive. As I pulled away, the mansion's lights glowed behind me, reflections trembling in the rearview mirror. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Dad. I really am proud of you. I should have said it years ago. I smiled and typed back, see you at the board meeting. For years, they'd told me I was playing in the kiddie pool. But the truth was simple. The kiddie pool had just been practice. The ocean was mine now. And they were already swimming in it. The highway stretched ahead of me in long, clean lines, the kind of road where you can think without interruption. The night air pressed cool against the windshield, and the faint reflection of the city shimmered like a promise on the horizon. Seattle was 2 hours north, but I didn't mind the distance. Distance had always been my strength. David called before I reached the turnpike. I pressed the button on my steering wheel. Yes. It's done, he said. Funds restored. 200 million as requested. The Anderson board already got the notification. It's chaos again, but controlled this time. Good, I said. Also, he added, your name's about to hit the financial news. Someone leaked part of the filing before the update cleared. They'll know Pacific Northwest Ventures is you by morning. I expected that. You sure you're ready for that level of exposure? I've been invisible long enough, I said. Let them see. He paused. And your family? They'll have to learn how to look me in the eye. Erica David said quietly, you did what most people only dream about. You took control of the story. I didn't take control, I corrected him. I reclaimed it. We hung up. The freeway curved along the bay water, glinting in the distance like liquid steel. I rolled down the window, let the wind cut through the quiet hum inside the car. It carried the faint smell of salt of tides turning. For years, I'd measured my worth against their approval. Tonight, I'd recalibrated the scale. The numbers balanced differently. Now, respect quantified independence accounted for. I hadn't just proven them wrong. I'd redefined the equation. My dashboard lit with another message, this time from Thomas. You were right. About everything. See you Monday, Director Vale. I smiled. He'd always been the quiet one, the one who noticed without judgment. Maybe there was hope in that. As I drove, my thoughts drifted to the house behind me. I pictured Marcus pacing with his phone doing damage control. Victoria pouring another glass of wine, she wouldn't finish her pride leaking through the cracks. My mother sitting in that heavy silence, replaying every word she'd said to me over the years. And my father, Richard Anderson, standing in his study, realizing that empire and family aren't the same thing, and that both can crumble if you stop seeing the people who build them. Somewhere deep inside, I wasn't angry anymore, just done. By the time I reached the city limits, the skyline was waking up, glass towers glowing like circuit boards against the dark. I took the exit toward the waterfront, toward the office where my real work lived. The building was quiet when I arrived. The lobby lights low, the security guard giving me a nod he'd perfected over years of pretending not to know who I really was. Upstairs, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the harbor. I walked to my desk. On it sat a small brass nameplate, Erica Vale, CEO, Pacific Northwest Ventures. It had been there for years, unseen by the people who thought they knew me best. I opened my laptop, and watched as the market shifted in real time. Numbers rolled like waves. The world was recalculating, rewriting my place in its ledger. A notification pinged an email from my father. Draft partnership agreement attached. Let's do this right this time. I downloaded it, scanned the document. It was fair, thorough, even humble. At the bottom, he'd written by hand, "Thank you for teaching me what legacy really means." I leaned back in my chair and let the words sink in. Legacy wasn't inherited, it was built. And mine was built on silent strategy and an unshakable sense of self they never saw coming. The city lights reflected in the glass in front of me, bright and endless. Somewhere behind me, the ocean waited deep, patient, inevitable. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. I closed my laptop, whispered to the empty room, "Let the tide come in." And as the waves broke against the shore below, I knew they already had.